So this is the press preview on Sky News when we have a look at what's on the front pages of tomorrow. We'll talk through those in the next 30 minutes with former advisor to Ed Miliband, Ayesha Hazarika, and The Sun's political editor, Tom Newton-Dunn. Good to see you both. Before we have a chat, let's just run you through the front pages. The FT, the EU warns UK companies of a regulatory chill after Brexit as it seeks to accelerate private sector preparations for a no-deal UK exit. Brexit has also made the front of the Telegraph. It reveals the UK's plans for a bespoke Brexit is at risk of being derailed by Germany. The PM's reshuffle on the front of the Mail this morning. It calls it the massacre of the middle-aged men. The Times reports a leading hospital is delaying chemotherapy for cancer patients and those who are terminally ill facing cuts to their treatment because of a chronic shortage of specialist nurses. The Eye is looking at the gender pay gap at the BBC as a Radio 4 presenter taken off the air for supporting a colleague's equal pay demands. Sex abuse trial of former football coach Barry Bennell on the front of The Guardian. Harry's bride-to-be, Meghan Markle, making the top of the Metro, as you can see. The Prime Minister and her war on plastic waste is their main headline. Meghan Markle on the Star as well. A row broke out about the future royal in the celebrity Big Brother house last night, apparently. Shock horror. A worrying report in The Express reveals millions of Britain's elderly are reliant on a basic state pension of just £7,000 a year to pay the bills and live in retirement. The Mirror has a story about Lord Lucan's wife. It says she took her own life over mistaken fears that she had Parkinson's. So let's talk through some of those with Ayesha and with Tom. You want to start with the Big Brother house?
No? Strangely, we missed that catastrophic development in the nation's history.
It will no doubt sell some copies, though, sadly. Let's have a look at the Mail, then, should we, in a much more serious story. They're calling it the massacre of the middle-aged men, looking at the sort of second half of the reshuffle today.
Yes, and it certainly was. It was a spectacularly brutal affair, actually. I think us Westminster sources spent much of yesterday watching a series of catastrophes hit Theresa May's best laid plans, which ended up her top team in the cabinet not really looking very different at all. Today, completely different affair. The mid-ranks, so mid and lower rankings of the government, all the way down to the whips, had a complete, or half a complete clean-out. Something like 50 different jobs changed hands, which is about half the entire government. Out went 7 different male, pale and stale ministers, so middle-aged male Tories who've been around for a little bit. Some early fired, although 2 were given the polite option of resigning, which they then did after being given no choice whatsoever. And in came 8 new women, 7, I think it was, new ethnic minority ministers, black and Asian descent. Sorry, 5 new one of those, but 7 BME promotions. 18 women were also promoted in the quagmire. So you do end up with a mid-ranking government looking quite different to the way it started. The problem is no one really has a clue who any of these people are, apart from sad people like me.
Not yet.
Not yet, and that's the point, because this is all supposed to be laying the foundations for, one day a cabinet to actually represent the country, rather than the single BME face. Sajid Javid's out of 29 there currently are, and the 8 or 10 women who actually attend, although 2 aren't really allowed to say very much, out of the 29, obviously the 21 being men.
So a very diverse cabinet in the future.
Well,
Ayesha. Are you going to find yourself voting Tory?
Absolutely not. I mean, but look at the cabinet as it is today. That is not a picture of modern Britain. That is not a picture of sort of diversity in the full range of all the talents. And I think one of the problems is that this reshuffle got briefed very, very hard as a very feminist reshuffle, and there was going to be all these kind of exciting moves at the top. And we really didn't see that happen. In fact, what we saw was quite a lot of mediocre men who aren't really doing that great a job, got to hang on to their jobs and in fact got a promotion. I mean, the idea that Jeremy Hunt was called in to get the shove and get the sack and swaggered out with a bigger promotion shows you that Theresa May is incredibly weak. I think she could have had a completely different reshuffle. The headlines do not look good for her because she's not been able to exert her control. If she moved just 1 or 2 people, for example, Boris Johnson, we understand she wanted to move him, but again, he wasn't going to have it. So the only person she did move was Justine Greening. Justine Greening is a relatively young woman, the first ever lesbian woman in the cabinet, Northern, went to a state school. She's actually got quite a lot of modernity about her. She appeals to sort of a younger voter, and yet she was hoofed out because she was seen as being a bit too challenging in that cabinet room to Theresa May, particularly on grammar schools. And I think that ranks of hypocrisy because Boris Johnson has been madly disloyal in public to Theresa May about her leadership, and yet he still gets to keep his job.
Yeah, but can you imagine him being on the back benches? I mean,
Well, do you know what? He's causing her enough trouble. You know, there's this whole argument about keep your enemies close. He wrote this letter, this essay to the Telegraph just in the eve of her conference. So he's hardly towing the line and being her best mate and her greatest cheerleader. I think this is a missed opportunity, but it is good, as Tom said, at that junior level, there has been a lot more talent coming through. But you know what politics is like? People won't know who they are. And at the end of the day, they just see a couple of faces, and Theresa May is still the top person. And they'll know a couple of people from the cabinet, and they'll all be white blokes.
Let's have a look at the Times inside pages, and I've got a bit more sort of facts and figures on all of this, Tom.
Yeah, so there you have the overall picture. The cabinet didn't change too much, but the changes that did happen, people like Patrick McLaughlin, the pretty veteran, now legendary ageing Tory MP, who was a miner by trade, no university education at all, first appointed minister under Margaret Thatcher. He left the government. In his place came one or two others. But there's a nice little graphic there on the left-hand side, which I'm not sure we will be able to pull up. But
well, I can have a go, but it might be a bit blurred.
There you go. Now, if you can read that, you've got better eyesight than us. But I can tell you what it does say, luckily, and that is that the number of Oxbridge-educated cabinet ministers has gone up in the last 24 hours. So has the number of privately educated cabinet ministers, only by a small amount, because there wasn't a huge amount of change in the cabinet. But this is not the sort of thing that Theresa May wanted, which is why the reshuffle has gone wrong. And I mean, there's a lesson there for all prime ministers. The truth is, all prime ministers hate doing reshuffles because it's a time of huge potential danger. If they go well, then, you know, it's quite frankly all been expected anyway, and it's been pre-briefed, and so there's not much gain. If they go badly, they can really expose your weaknesses, and not being in charge, not getting to decide who sits around her top table doing what jobs, Theresa May has been painfully exposed as today, and that was her fault. There is one interesting thing she did do there, and that's the middle picture. I mean, the choreographing and the presentation of certainly the gender and the race improvements that we've seen is quite interesting. Here there's Theresa May, just that you can see on the right-hand side. The 6 other women in this picture are all elected in 2015, brand new, really, Tory MPs, only been around for a couple of years, and they've all gone in the Whip's office. So these are, I mean, we could really get into the most appalling patronising sort of comments. Theresa's, fantastic 6 enforcers, which luckily I'm not going to do. But these are the new disciplinarians that she's now bringing in to try and run the party for her.
The top jobs in the Whip's office are all men's.
There is that unfortunate problem still, but again, it's building for the future.
Yeah.
Policy-wise, something else is happening this week. It's kind of interesting, and you have it there on the front Times as well. What do you do if you're a government without a majority, without very much money, and with, quite frankly, a cabinet pretty heavily split on, the big issues, Brexit, social care, whatever? Will you go for the lowest common denominator? Quite frankly, everybody's going to agree on, and guess what? That's going to be the environment. Everybody wants a cleaner planet. Certainly all the focus groups showing up, those sort of key target voters that Tories missed at the 2017 general election 7 months ago. The sort of middle ground and the young people who went to Jeremy Corbyn in absolute droves, they care passionately about the environment, cleaning the place up. So, come Thursday, we're going to get the government's environment strategy. 25-year look ahead, where they're going to do a whole lot of different things, including a massive look at, single-use plastics, plastic bags, and big tightening up on all that. I
mean, this is a very good thing, and there'll be cross-party support for it. Indeed, Mary Creagh and the Labour side's been calling this week for a latte levy. So, I think there'll be a lot of agreement. But don't be fooled. This nod to environmental issues, and by the way, there's lots of other things on the environment that they're not doing properly, things like feed-in tariffs and supporting the renewables, energy industry and all that kind of thing. But this is not going to be enough to suddenly get these hordes of young people that managed for the first time to get to the ballot box and vote for Jeremy Corbyn and sing Jeremy Corbyn's name at Glastonbury, because what he offered them was more. I mean, obviously there was the tuition fees, but there was
that he since said he couldn't really deliver.
Well, there was a tuition fees which he says is costed, and that's what they said their manifesto was costed. But he offered as well, I think, a bigger set of values that really appealed to young people. So
values, or just was it a protest movement?
No, I think it was much more. I mean, certainly the young people I spoke to who were not ever really politically engaged tapped into him, partly because of a cultural thing and because they liked what he was talking about. A lot of young people do care about, society, and they care about the gap between the top and the bottom, and they care about things like the NHS. So the problem that goes back to Theresa May, this reshuffle aside, most people would just get a tiny wee glimpse of politics through the television, and the people they will still see are Theresa May, a bit of Boris Johnson, and probably a bit of David Davis because of Brexit, and maybe a bit of Philip Hammond. Are they the faces that are going to appeal to this new generation? I think not.
They're not. I think the thing about doing things like environment and also ruling out a vote to overturn the fox hunting ban, which Theresa May finally did on Sunday, what they do is they make a decent stab at trying to get the sort of target people that they lost in their droves last year at the election to just listen again. If you can share the same values as young people, more socially liberal people, if you can reconnect with them and make them think, actually, maybe they are thinking what I'm thinking, maybe their heart is in the right place after all, they're not just cruel, horrible callous Tories who bang on about Brexit the whole time, maybe then you've got a shot, and that's obviously what Theresa May is going for here.
OK, well, let us know if that appeals to you, if you're at the younger end of the voting scale. At Sky Stephen for all of your thoughts tonight. We'll take a break. Back with more for you in just a moment as the Daily Mail accuses Virgin Trains of censorship. This is the press preview, and we're talking through the papers with Ayesha Hazarika and Tom Newton-Dunn. Let's talk about the BBC. And money, and women.
The BBC. Well, the BBC always has this incredible ability to take a sort of bad story and make it worse. So the BBC have now silenced somebody else. There's a reporter, presenter called Winifred Robinson. She is a Radio 4 presenter. She tweeted in support of Gracie Carey, the former China editor who resigned over equal pay.
Or Carrie Gracie.
Oh, sorry, Carrie Gracie, sorry.
Do you know, it's easy to get.
I know, it's very late now, it's very late. And she's been not been allowed to do this segment on it. And I think this is just ridiculous by the BBC. Women's Hour had a similar issue about how one of the presenters wasn't allowed to interview this woman as well. And I think the BBC has to just take a step back and think, right, enough is enough. Get a grip on this. This is not a surprise. These figures we saw these last slew of figures came out. But also, this is not the first time the BBC's got into hot water about discrimination against women. There was a woman called Miriam O'Reilly who won an age discrimination case against the BBC quite a while ago. And it's like the BBC just don't seem to learn. It cannot be beyond the wit of them to get this sorted out. They're funded by the taxpayer, and they should pay their men and women talent equally.
And the BBC is a wonderful thing. Unfortunately, all the wonderfulness is in the creation of programmes and the production of news, not in the management. They are a staggering bureaucratic pile of nonsense. And the reason why they don't sort stuff out is because things get stuck in internal committees. Really simple answer. You don't pay everyone an absolute fortune. You don't give everyone the same sort of Hugh Edwards style £600,000 a year. You simply cut these massively overpaid male presenters' pay by huge amounts. Hugh Edwards isn't going to come and work here. You wouldn't want him for a start.
I quite like Hugh.
Yeah, but you're far better than Hugh.
He sent me a nice tweet the other day, so I'm going to defend him all the way.
We're going to get through all our stories for once.
Yes, we are. Yes, I know. I noticed
this is media
hour. Wind Ayesha up before. Yes, Virgin Trains then.
So Virgin Trains, so from the BBC to the Daily Mail. Interesting story today where Virgin Trains, in the auspices of Richard Branson himself, announced that he was banning the Daily Mail from his West Coast line. From now on, you won't be able to buy the Daily Mail on his trains. You only buy the FT, the Times, the Financial Times, I think it's the Daily Mirror. And the Brexit conspiracists all say this because they are all very Remain-supporting papers, and he's a aching Remainiac, and therefore that's why. I think it's a bit more to do with the values that Richard Branson says that the Daily Mail, he cannot share. One of those values I didn't quite sort of go into. But this, in my view, I was interested to see how the Daily Mail would cover this, whether they want to cover it at all, and fair play to them, they do, although they also give it the backlash spin. This is yet another example of staggering acts of censorship. Just because you don't agree with people, just you don't agree with a publication's views on the world, banning and censoring is utterly the wrong way to go about it. And it comes after, companies like Paperchase, Pizza Hut, dared to do advertising promotions with papers like Daily Mail and my own, which has, by the way, been unavailable on Virgin trains for years. I think we even noticed, but apparently you can't buy The Sun, or for that matter, the Daily Telegraph either. But it's this social media mobs that go and jump on causes that you just happen to disagree with, and then somehow, it has to end. Quite staggering intolerance is what's supposed to be a very tolerant age we live in.
I feel very conflicted about the story because I hate the idea of censorship in any way. I think on a practical level, they're not going to stock a full news agency in a small sort of
Well, they only
shop
sell 70
online.
copies of the Mail a day. Apparently.
Exactly, they were not flying off the shelves, to be absolutely fair. And
that's
a
kill the Daily Mail's
practical-
profits.
Exactly, that's a kind of practical point. And I hate the kind of censorship thing, but on the one point I would just make is, I do think the tide is slightly turning on the sort of bile that a lot of the Daily Mail does kind of spew. A lot of people do kind of quite like reading the Daily Mail, but of late, probably not just of late, some people have felt quite uncomfortable about the type, of whether it's language on immigrants and that kind of thing. And I think there is a bit of a shift. And, post-Brexit, this country has become more divided, but there's a lot of people that have actually taken, I suppose offence is the right word, but they just look at some of the stuff in the Daily Mail and think, I just find this quite unpleasant.
Well, you might find it unpleasant to read. It might not be my cup of tea either. But the point is, it is their right to say whatever they want and to offend.
Absolutely.
If it offends, and do you know what? If you're not offended by it,
exactly.
you
But
have
it's
to buy
also Virgin Trains' right. If they're short on space, they can choose what publications to sell.
So how do they know there's not a whole lot of Daily Mail readers and buyers who are getting on their trains?
Because otherwise,
they may choose to take another
Because
train.
otherwise the Daily Mail would be flying off the shelves, and it ain't.
Nothing flies off the shelves of trains.
Well, they're clearly saying
not.
that they're not. It's not a big seller for them.
Yeah. Anyway, look, this
Market forces would prevail.
Be interested to see how many FTs the Virgin
that's true.
sell as well.
Well, look, you two will be pleased to know that you are on track for hitting all of the papers you've selected. So this is the last one.
Here is something the country can unite over. No bile here.
All
Not yet,
unite
anyway.
on this.
A £45 sweater.
Well, it's in contrast with the hugely expensive dress that she wore for those publicity pictures.
That was about 36 grand.
It was
wasn't
it was like a deposit for a flat, basically. But she is, the sweetheart of the nation. She's wowing the crowds. Everybody loves her. And I have to say, she and Harry do look ridiculously happy everywhere they go together. And it's injecting a bit of joy into the nation.
And if ever there was two people who could sum up, modern Britain, both from slightly troubled backgrounds, from split families, albeit, reasonably privileged backgrounds, and where do they go after they admittedly did spend their rather nice New Year in Monaco? They go to Brixton. Which is a tough part of South London. I live very near it. And they go to see a radio station and they talk to people about knife crime. Yeah. And they are adored. And the streets of Brixton were absolutely thronging, impromptu crowds, 5, 6, 7 deep to see this couple. It's a lovely story, and they are a mixed race couple.
Do you know what struck me with this?
Everything about modern Britain is pretty good.
What I liked about it is the fact that you had this one. I can't think what it's called, Giovanni something or other, who passed his business card.
Oh, yeah.
The DJ.
And said, I'll DJ at your wedding. And the fact that he felt able to do that, I really liked.
And actually, some of the people that were interviewed afterwards just said that they felt really accessible. She felt very, very down to earth. The other bit of news about her today is she has decided to suspend all her social media accounts because she's also joining the firm.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea for a lot of people, actually.
Yeah.
So anyone who's about to troll me, just make like Meghan and delete your account.
To blow your royal wedding with a late-night piss tweet would be a pretty big...
Or also just to not be bothered by all the trolling. I'm sure she's going to have a much happier life than the two of us.
There's an idea.
Yes, well, lovely. Good to see you both. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get a check on the weather for you.